All right, so I just want to get straight to this. So I found out that the Catholic Church is endorsing Donald Trump, and the things that they are saying are pretty outrageous. I want to share it with you guys. Now, in order to do this and have the audio go, I actually had to use the actual audio from my phone. So you're going to hear me eating my lunch and eating food. Just to let you know, I apologize for that. But, anyways, this is absolutely crazy. I'm going to play it from the beginning to the end, and there are a few interruptions here and there because I'm using my phone to do this, but hopefully, you guys enjoy it because it is amazing.
What's at stake in this election from Catholic Archbishop Carlo Vigano? Please read this. Dear faithful American, open letter to Please read this. Open letter to American Catholics one eve of the 2024 presidential election. Dear faithful American Catholics, I am addressing all of you, a few days before the presidential election that will call millions of American citizens to the polls. Even in conditions of relative normality, the exercise of the vote is your moral duty, through which you cooperate in the first person in choosing the person who will lead the nation for the next 4 years. But in this coming electoral round, just as in 2020 and indeed much more S0, you are not simply called to choose between two candidates who happen to be on different political sides but who both nevertheless have a remarkably insightful description of what's at stake in this election from Catholic Archbishop Carlo Vigano. Please read this. Open letter to American Catholics on the eve of the 2024 presidential election. Dear faithful American Catholics, I am addressing all of you, a few days before the presidential election that will call millions of American citizens to the polls. Even in conditions of relative normality, on one side we have candidate Donald J. Trump, who, despite serious problems in his positions, especially in the matter of abortion and assisted procreation, has as his objective the common good and the protection of the fundamental freedoms of citizens. In Donald Trump's America, every Catholic can practice their faith and educate their children in it without interference from the state. On the other side we have a candidate and a party that promotes everything that directly opposes the faith and morals of the Catholic Church. In Kamala Harris's America, Catholics but also Protestants are considered fundamentalists to be marginalized and eliminated, and their children are considered the property of the state, which arrogates to itself the right to lead them astray from an early age in both body and soul. Trump's America can become great in a remarkably insightful description of what's at stake in this election from Catholic Archbishop Carlo Vigano. Look at your country. Your cities have become dumps filled with derelicts and criminals, drug dealers and addicts, prostitutes and robbers. Your schools are dens of indoctrination and corruption from kindergarten onwards. In your courts, criminals are acquitted and innocents are imprisoned. New ideological crimes are prosecuted, while illegality is tolerated and encouraged. In your hospitals, multinational corporations rule, and you are their guinea pigs to be exterminated or made chronically ill so that you will be their perpetual clients. Farmers, ranchers, and fishermen are persecuted and forced to fail, while the land is grabbed by unscrupulous corporations who transform it into endless photovoltaic systems and wind turbines to power their data centers and server farms where they collect all your data, your movements, your purchases, and your political preferences. They have gone so far as to Tamner WVITH the clear. A remarkably insightful description. In order to make the global warming fraud credible and impose the green transition, the increase in the cost of energy, and electric cars and scooters. And all this is done based on evidence that consists of lies without any scientific proof, but which are propagated through the servile collaboration of the regime media, ever ready to label any dissenters as conspiracy theorists. But what until yesterday was dismissed as the result of conspiracy theories is now admitted by the government itself. They take away your sunlight. They poison you by seeding the clouds. They overwhelm your villages and your fields with deadly hurricanes. They kill your livestock and dry up your crops with induced droughts and devastating fires. They aim to control the entire food sector, to force you to eat only what they make available to you. This is what the Agenda 2030 calls for, which has been imposed nithotni. Woto high plus holy do number. is what the Agenda 2030 calls for, which has been imposed without any vote by the United Nations and the World Economic Forum. In these 4 disastrous years of the Biden-Harris administration, we have had a puppet in the White House and a corrupt and incompetent vice president who has never stopped lying and deceiving voters about her past and her future. Power is managed by the criminal deep state, whose names and faces we now know that is responsible for the destruction of your great nation. And to ensure that the crisis is endless, new war scenarios are continually opening up, in conflicts that no one actually wants, except for those who make enormous profits from them, sacrificing human lives and compromising international stability. You have seen what the Democrats, that is, the woke far left, have been capable of in 4 years. Imagine what they will be able to do if, instead of Biden's numerous stand-ins, his vice president is elected in the most scandalous and unimaginable fraud, with her entourage of LGBTQ+ ministers, rigorously woke, sold out to China or the World Economic Forum, sponsored by George Soros or Bill Gates, manipulated by Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. At that point, dear American Catholics, you will not only have to go to a different rally, as Kamala would like in order to say, Christ is the Lord, because saying that will be considered hate speech, and praying in front of an abortion clinic an act of terrorism. Do not think that these are remote hypotheses. Wherever the woke left takes power, it establishes the most vicious, anti-human, and anti-Christian dictatorship that humanity on. A remarkably anti-human, and anti-Christian dictatorship that humanity has ever known. And we know that every time the left has come to power, it has never left through democratic means. Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, we are not talking about 2 visions that are a bit different but still part of the normal political back and forth. No, we are talking about 2 diametrically opposed and irreconcilable worlds, in which Trump fights against the deep state and is committed to freeing America from its tentacled grip, while on the opposite side we have a corrupt and blackmailed candidate, an organic part of the deep state, who acts as a puppet in the hands of warmongers like Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton, of self-proclaimed philanthropists, like the criminals George Soros and Klaus Schwab, or of characters like Jeffrey Epstein and Sean Combs. Their program is that of the global FTW. A remarkably insight of characters like Jeffrey Epstein and Sean Combs. Their program is that of the global left, the World Economic Forum, the Rockefeller Foundation, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and ultimately the program of Vanguard, BlackRock, and State Street. Their agenda is dictated by the financial oligarchy that controls humanity to the detriment of the people, an elite that operates not only in the United States but also in Canada, Australia, Europe, and wherever politics is held hostage by their investment funds and their pseudo-humanitarian organizations dedicated to the obliteration of Western civilization. Behind these people, by now we should know this, are people devoted to evil, united by the satanic hatred against our Lord Jesus Christ and those who believe in him, mainly against the Catholic faithful. We want Christ to reign, and we proclaim it with pride. Christ is King. They want the Antichrist to reign, whose tyranny is made of chaos, war, disease, famine, and death. And the more emergencies and crises planned and created by the globalist elite increase, the more that elite has a pretext to impose new limitations, new restrictions of fundamental rights, and new social controls. Joe Biden, the current president, is a servant of this subversive elite and widely blackmailable for the scandals and crimes committed by himself personally and also by his family, beginning with his son Hunter. His vice president, Kamala Harris, is equally subservient to the same deep state. And the Democratic Party, to which they both belong, is the expression of the woke ideology that plagues all the parties of the global left. Candidate Donald J. Trump, while certainly taking some serious critical positions that a Catholic cannot agree with, represents for us, dear American faithful, in this specific historical moment, the only possible choice to counter the globalist coup that the woke left is about to implement definitively, irreparably, and with incalculable damage for future generations. Voting for Donald Trump means firmly distancing ourselves from an anti-Catholic, anti-Christian and anti-human vision of society. It means stopping those who want to create a hellish dystopia that is even worse than the one announced by George Orwell. And it also means do not forget giving him our vote of confidence, so that President Trump knows that the massive vote of Catholics and Christians that brought him back to the White House must become the premise for a more incisive commitment to the defense of life from conception to natural death, the traditional family, the right of parents to educate their children, and to the defense of the Christian faith and the cultural identity of the nation. I repeat, the choice is between a conservative president, who is paying with his very life for his fight against the deep state, and an infernal monster who obeys Satan. For a Catholic, there can be no question. Voting for Kamala Harris is morally inadmissible and constitutes a very grave sin. Nor is it morally possible to abstain, because in this war declaring oneself neutral means allying oneself with the enemy. People around the world are beginning to understand the threat that looms over them and their children's future, and you Americans have understood it too. But even if this time it will be more difficult for the deep state to repeat the fraud of 2020, you must not think that it will resign itself to defeat so easily. Let us therefore prepare to prevent possible attacks and civil war scenarios from being used to impose martial law and new restrictions, after the attempts on his life from which President Trump providentially escaped. But let us not forget, dear faithful, that human energies alone are powerless in the face of this infernal display of forces. Being proclaimed that Christ is King, this means that our Lord must return to reign, and the first way to make him reign is by obeying his holy law and living in his grace. Let Christ reign in your hearts, in your families, in your communities, and throughout the entire United States of America. This is the only way to peace, harmony, and prosperity for your nation. Prosperity for your nation. Think of how many of you Catholics there are in the United States. Vote without hesitation, and pray that our Lord will enlighten American citizens in making their choice and grant victory to those who, at least, have no problem proclaiming that Christ is Lord. May God bless you all, and may the Virgin of Guadalupe, she who is the patroness of the United States and all the Americas, and Saint Michael the Archangel, protect you. Plus Carlo Vigano, Archbishop, former Apostolic Nuncio to the United States of America. October 22, 2024. A remarkably insightful description of